subjects are more debated by shooters today than what is the ideal shooting stance for handguns. The classic Weaver stance or the modern isosceles stance. Hello, I'm Robert Levesque, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the differences between the Weaver and the isosceles stance. I'm going to demonstrate both stances for you, and I'm also going to give the advantages of each stance so that you can make an educated decision for yourself on what is the ideal shooting stance. Let's begin by talking about the Weaver stance. The Weaver stance was developed in the 1950s by an LA County sheriff by the name of Jack Weaver. He developed the shooting stance to win competition shoots. And shortly after winning one of his largest competition shoots, Jack Weaver was quoted by Firearms History and Technology and Development, and here's what Jack Weaver said. "It looked kind of stupid, and everyone laughed at me, but it worked." The Weaver stance worked. Now this stance that everybody was laughing at in the 1950s is now today the most recognized handgun shooting stance in America. It's the same shooting stance you see most actors using on television. It is considered the standard shooting stance. Let me go ahead and demonstrate the Weaver stance for you, and I bet you're going to recognize it. Now the Weaver shooting stance resembles that of a boxer's fighting stance. Your legs are a little bit more than shoulder width apart. Your strong leg is to the rear, weak leg is to the front. Knees bent, flexibility in the hips, and hands up. Boxer shooting stance. But, unlike the boxer shooting stance, where 60% of your weight is to your rear, with the Weaver shooting stance, 60% of your weight goes on your front leg, 40% to the rear. You'll naturally lean forward. Upon naturally leaning forward with your knees bent, a little bit more than shoulder width apart as we talked about, your gun, when you hold the firearm with a 50-50 push-pull. That's pretty standard for any shooting stance in America today. You bring the 50-50 push-pull, you bring the gun up to your eye level, and instead of bringing your head down to the gun, you bring your gun up to your eye level. Your support arm, this arm over here that is actually not holding, the support arm, the elbow should be pointing straight down to the ground and not out, winging out like a chicken wing, but straight down to the ground. And your other shooting arm should be slightly bent, not locked up. So this is the classic Weaver stance, the most recognized shooting stance today. And the Weaver stance has many advantages. It was developed using the boxer's fighting stance because it gives the most stability of any handgun shooting stance out there. So if you're shooting a large caliber pistol that may rock you back on your heels, you have the support emplacement already to absorb that recoil without losing your balance. Additionally, if you are shooting at a target and they're shooting back at you, you're only providing your side profile to that target, which makes you a leaner, thinner, harder to hit target because your profile is your side profile and not the full width of your full front-on profile. Additionally, law enforcement and military like the Weaver stance because you can check your rear or your 6 o'clock simply by turning your head. Turning your head, I can see directly behind me without ever actually having to leave the shooting stance. These advantages that the Weaver shooting stance provided made the Weaver shooting stance the ideal shooting stance in America for half a century. But now lately, a new shooting stance, the isosceles shooting stance, has been getting a lot of attention. And it is even being adopted by the U.S. military and other law enforcement agencies as the standard shooting stance. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the isosceles shooting stance. The isosceles shooting stance is a much easier shooting stance to master. You square up with the target instead of using the boxer's profile. Shoulders a little bit more than about his feet, frogs here more than shoulder width apart, knees slightly bent, same 50-50 push-pull grip that we talked about before, and you lock this time you actually lock your elbows out and extend the gun all the way forward. This way, you're in an isosceles stance, and the joints between your shoulders and the handgun itself create a perfect isosceles triangle from which the stance gets its name. Now, the isosceles stance has several advantages. Firstly, you have a wide range of motion with the isosceles shooting stance. I can engage targets all the way from my 9 o'clock position all the way to my 3 o'clock position without ever changing my feeding position. You simply swing your hips like the turn of a tank, and I can swing from side to side and never have to leave my feet position as I would with the Weaver stance. With the Weaver stance, you have to change position. So that is an advantage for the isosceles shooting stance. Additionally, even though you are showing your full-on profile to the target, modern military and law enforcement wear body armor. With body armor, the key component of body armor is the strike plate. The strike plate is what actually absorbs the bullet, the first impact bullet. And the body of the strike plate covers your entire chest cavity, protecting all your vital organs. Now, with the isosceles stance, you are square on, and the strike plate absorbs your entire, protects your entire chest. With the Weaver stance, when you are wearing body armor, you are exposing your rib cage to the target, which renders this strike plate useless. That is one of the main reasons a lot of law enforcement and military have begun adopting the isosceles shooting stance as the standard shooting stance. Now, for those that are not in law enforcement or military, RealFighting.com has come up with a study that says the person that carries a handgun for mere defensive purposes should also adopt the isosceles shooting stance. And the reason they say this is they conducted an extensive study looking at surveillance videos of people who have been attacked who were carrying a sidearm at the time to see how they responded. And then, in almost every single example, people would initially, when being surprised by an attacker, first crouch and cover up, draw their firearm, and then, for some reason, want to push away their attacker to create the most distance between them and their attacker. Well, when they do this, they naturally find themselves almost automatically in the isosceles shooting stance. So, since you're almost automatically, without even thinking, going to end up in the isosceles shooting stance, RealFighting.com says you should adopt the isosceles shooting stance as the shooting stance that you mastered, because in most scenarios, when your fight or flight kicks in, before you even realize what you're going to be doing, you're going to be very close to the isosceles shooting stance. So those advantages of both the Weaver and the isosceles shooting stance both have strong merit. So which is the ideal shooting stance? That I cannot tell you, and I won't tell you. That is for you to decide. You are going to have to take the information I have just provided you and decide for yourself what is the most ideal shooting stance for you. Let's go over what I've talked about today. Today I have talked about the Weaver shooting stance and the isosceles shooting stance. I've demonstrated both stances for you, and I've given you the advantages of each stance. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time. Thank you for your time and attention.